Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. I'm Dr. Kathleen Brown, and I'm the director of the University of Utah Reading Clinic, here to talk to you about the Reading Level Assessment, as we affectionately call it, the RLA. We've made some changes, and I want to talk to you a little bit about those so that you're not nervous. I know how it is when you just love an instrument and you hate it when it changes, right? But we've made these changes with a lot of sound theory and research and deliberation in mind. So I think I can probably guess some of the features that have made you a fan of the RLA over time. You wouldn't be a fan, if you aren't a fan, you wouldn't be watching this, right? But I think some of the features you like are, first, it gives you an instructional level for a child right away so you can begin working with him or her. I think you also really like the fact that down the road, you can give the RLA again, which allows you to compute gain from the baseline. Who doesn't like that? I also think you really like the ability to enter these data for one child or even for your own classroom into our online system, which then produces some lovely reports. It crunches the numbers for you and produces reports that you can share with colleagues, administrators, parents, etc. And so those are all things that I think have been helpful for teachers in Utah and around the country. We're proud of those features. We're also proud of the fact that in a larger sense, the RLA has excellent psychometric qualities. It has high reliability, high validity. And so you might be surprised to know that the RLA has actually been used in quite a few studies as a way to measure reading gain in high quality peer-reviewed journals, Reading Research Quarterly, Journal of Ed Psych. And so it's well known beyond just here in Utah. So the way you want to think about any instrument, though, is you always want to be looking at if it's doing the right thing at the right time and changing with the times in ways that make sense. There have been a lot of changes in the reading field over the last 20 years, and we've been looking at the RLA all along, thinking about research, thinking about theory, deliberating. And in the last few years, we've come to the conclusion that some changes do need to be made. And Kelly will be explaining those to you in a minute. But I just wanted to let you know that we didn't embark on this with a sense of, oh, let's make changes for change's sake. Not at all. We took our time. And believe me, I drug my feet along the way to a certain extent. But I'm really happy with the changes we've made. I think they're sound. I think they're based on research and theory. We're all on the same page with them. And you'll be pleased to know that we did not touch the grade 1 or the grade 2 passages or their criteria. Why fix what isn't broken, right? So before I sign off, there are a couple people I would like to acknowledge here and give some thanks for. First would be Dr. Daryl Morris, our mentor, who is the original developer of the RLA. And in fact, he developed early steps and next steps back in the day. And if you read Daryl's work, which I suggest you do, you'll see that his version of the RLA and ours are very similar. And so we really are thankful to him for getting us started off on the right foot with being able to measure gain and to be able to get a level for, particularly for beginning struggling readers. The other person I want to acknowledge here today is Dr. Matt Fields. Without Matt, we wouldn't have any of those beautiful forms, all of those online offerings that we provide for you. That's all Matt. And I bet he wishes he had $1 for every revision and edit he's made over the years, but he just never stops being precise and professional. And so I thank him for that, and I know you do too. So our collective heartfelt thanks to both Dr. Daryl Morris and Dr. Matthew Fields. And now, without further ado, let's have Dr. Kelly Patrick tell you all about the changes, the nuts and bolts and why, and what it means to you. If you have any questions at any time, please get in touch with us, Kelly, myself, whoever, and we'll be happy to help you through it. Take it away, Kelly.
We're here to talk a little bit about some revisions that we've made to the RLA. And we're just going to dive right into why we made some of the decisions we've made and how we even came to the idea that we wanted to look at revising in the first place. So we started talking about this about 4 years ago. The Utah core standards had come out about 6 years earlier, and there was a big push, and still is within the standards, for students to get a lot of exposure to informational text, enabling them to have a wide range of text experiences with different vocabulary, which will also build their background knowledge. That in mind, we were looking at the informational text that was out there that students were being asked to read. Now, there is no perfect formula for leveling text, but the informational text that's out there is being leveled by a system called Lexile. Lexiles are the most widely used and the most current reading leveling formula that is out there. And the schools are using it in their they see it in the curricula. We have free online text sources that use Lexiles. And we also have many widely used assessments like the SRI that report with Lexiles. Acadience now is also reporting Lexiles for students based on the composite scores. So looking at the standards and the push for informational text, and then looking at informational text and the fact that it was measured with Lexiles, and actually also the Utah core also has standards, grade level standards for the Lexile range that they want students reading in. We decided to look at our reading level assessment, and we want to ensure that if we're going to be using more of these informational texts that are measured with Lexile, that we need to make sure that our assessment is aligned using a similar metric that the text is. So that metric is Lexile. Lexile measures are based on two factors, word frequency or familiarity, which also is highly impacting students' familiarity with the words. If a word is frequent, it's often more familiar. If it's not as frequent, it is often less familiar. And if the text has a lot of unfamiliar vocabulary, it can increase the complexity of the text for students. Sentence length is the second major factor that contributes to a text Lexile level. Longer sentences contribute to higher Lexiles. Okay, when we then looked at Lexile, there are commonly bands of Lexiles that are reported by the core standards and Metametrics, who are the developers of Lexile. But there was also a study done where they looked at the Lexile that came out for a wide range of students. They found the 50th percentile for beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year from K up through 12. They also reported the 90th percentile range on those norms. At the reading clinic, we are looking at the 50th percentile, thinking around the average range. What is an average student at the end of 3rd grade, for example? What is the Lexile that they're able to handle? What text Lexile level? And that would be around 645, according to this study, as you can see right in here. That led us to looking at the RLA and finding an approximate Lexile. We used the Metametrics Lexile Analyzer to do this, and it gave us a range for the passages, and we selected the middle of the range they gave us to report here and use in our guideline. What we found was Boxer, which was our 3rd grade passage, came out at 900 Lexile, when the expected end of year Lexile for the 50th percentile student is 645. Okay, as you can see, that puts Boxer at a higher level of difficulty than we were aiming for if we're trying to align it again to the end of year expectations. Incredible Journey came out a little bit low. As you can see, Sheila Young, Garrett Morgan, also a little low compared to the end of year expectations for that 50th percentile or end of year performance level. Horses on Stable Island came up a bit high. So we decided to flip-flop Incredible Journey with Boxer to get closer to the expected range we were hoping for. And we decided to look at some new passages or a rearrangement to handle the upper grades. And this is what we ended up with. We placed Incredible Journey for our 3rd grade passage. As you can see, it's closer to the Lexile that we were looking for, 645, comes out at approximately 700. We put Boxer in and have made it a single passage assessment for placing students in grades 4 or 5. Right, so the expectation for the end of year Lexile for 4th grade is 850 and for 5th is 950, and Boxer came in at about 900. Women Pilots is our new passage that we're using for grades 6, 7, and 8. We'll talk a little bit more about why it's such a wide range of grades that's represented by the single passage. You can see down here, grade 6, end of year expectation for Lexile is 1030, and grade 8 is 1155. Okay, so Women Pilots comes out around the 7th, in the 7th grade zone. All right, in terms of the RLA administration and scoring, there are absolutely no changes to grade 1 and 2 passages. The passages have remained the same. Grade 2 passage, the single passage to differentiate between grade 2 mid and grade 2 end is the same. No changes there. We're using the same scoring procedures and decision-making criteria as we've done in the past. That has not changed. What we have done is using a single passage for grades 4 and 5 instead of separate passages. So one passage for both grade levels, and the instructional level placement is determined by the accuracy and the rate of the student using the UURC fluency criteria chart. We've selected a single passage, Women Pilots, to represent the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level. The accuracy criterion for all of those levels is 95%, but instructional level placement is determined based on rate, which is different for 6th, 7th, and 8th, referencing our UURC fluency criteria chart again. In terms of determining the instructional level placement on the RLA, I'm going to talk a little bit about research that supports the procedures we use in our RLA placements. Here's our fluency criteria chart. As you can see, the fluency criteria chart looks similar to what it has in the past, but there are some differences. There's only a single row starting at grade 3 for each grade level. There are no more differentiations between E, M, and D. We'll talk a little bit more about why that is. What you also are noticing here is that we have the single passage for grade 4 and 5 is reflected on the chart, Mark and Boxer, and we are going to place students into grade 4 or 5 based on their accuracy and their rate. For example, if Joe reads the grade 4-5 passage with 95% accuracy and he reads 98 words per minute, what would his instructional level be? Could be grade 4 or 5. Okay, we're looking for the highest place where Joe meets accuracy and rate criteria. So we take a look. Did he meet accuracy criteria for grade 4? He did. Did he meet rate criteria for grade 4? He did. Did he for 5? We should check that out, and we would want to. 95% accuracy meets grade 5 expectation, but the 98% falls short of the 110. That is how he ends up being placed with grade 4. We have another student, Eva, and she reads the 4-5 passage with 95% accuracy and at 110 words per minute. Then we'll take a look. what is the highest place that she meets both accuracy and rate criteria. Looking at the grade 4-5 passage, does she meet it for 4 or does she meet it for 5 or neither? She meets it for 5, spot on, 95% accuracy and 110 words per minute. So her instructional level placement would be grade 5. Most likely I would also have wanted to have given the 6, 7, 8 passage, women pilots, to make sure that she did not meet a higher level for instructional level. Again, there you can see by this chart, the single passage for grade 6, 7, and 8. And again, I would differentiate the student's instructional level placement based on accuracy and rate. All right, so now we're specifically going to talk about the research that backs up our numbers in terms of determining instructional level placement. Our fluency criteria chart is based on 2 primary areas of research. Hasbrook and Tyndall, who reported oral reading fluency norms. They reported updated norms in 2017. So we have referenced that one. And we're looking specifically at the 50th percentile. And then we also have looked at Acadian's beginning of year oral reading fluency benchmarks. We've looked at beginning of year as our guideline because we're looking to place students in the text at that level. This is a little bit of a background slide. Feel free to look at it a little bit more closely. But what was discovered was Metametrics and Dibble's Next at the time. Actually, it was Dibble's 6th edition. Authors got together and they created a linking study to see what the correlation was between oral reading fluency scores and Lexile scores that were assessed with silent comprehension reading. There was a moderate to strong correlation between the scores that students got on the Lexile silent reading comprehension assessment and their Dibble's oral reading fluency score. They then used the oral reading fluency scores and linear equating methodology to come up with a formula that would give them a Lexile that equated to an oral reading fluency score. This is fairly sophisticated in terms of reading leveling systems and the research behind them. It's one of the reasons we have elected to move forward with revisions in the RLA in terms of the increased sophistication of the Lexile formula in comparison to some of the reading leveling formulas of the past. All right, this slide's going to take a look at the oral reading fluency benchmarks, Hasbrook and Tyndall norms, and then we'll talk about the alignment with our UURC placement in terms of criteria. So as you can see, if we look at the 3rd grade, we have 70 words per minute as our benchmark at the beginning of 3rd grade. Hasbrook and Tyndall's 50th percentile indicated 83 words per minute in the fall for students performing at the 50th percentile. So fairly close, but a little bit of distance between those two. 90 words per minute for beginning 4th graders. So at the beginning of the year, 90 words per minute benchmark. Hasbrook and Tyndall, 94 words per minute for a 50th percentile placement. So closer to that grade. 5th grade level, 111 reported for the fall benchmark at the beginning of 5th grade, and then 121 words per minute for the 50th percentile in 5th grade. This is our biggest discrepancy so far between Hasbrook and Tyndall and the Acadian's benchmarks. You can see it actually gets even more discrepant when we move into 6th grade. 132 for Hasbrook and Tyndall's 50th percentile versus 107 for 6th grade fall benchmark. Some of the reasoning behind those are in the design of what Dibble's was setting out to measure and how they established benchmarks based on what they were attempting to measure versus Hasbrook and Tyndall's determination of simply looking for what, on average, what rate were students reading at the different grade levels in the different times of the year. So if we compare across them, we've factored in both. Again, they're not in complete agreement with each other. Acadian's beginning of year benchmark is not in complete agreement with what Hasbrook and Tyndall reported in 2017 for the 50th percentile. There are definite relationships there. The UURC criteria you can see over here. So 80 is falling closer to Hasbrook and Tyndall's for third grade. 95 is falling within a nice range for both Acadians and Hasbrook and Tyndall. And then 110 is definitely falling closer to the Acadians beginning of year benchmark than to Hasbrook and Tyndall's 50th percentile. Overall, though, the point here is that our fluency criteria has been based on research from both Acadians and Hasbrook and Tyndall, two widely regarded and accepted producers of oral reading fluency data. All right, so connecting the oral reading fluency, Lexiles, and instructional level. That linking study that we were just discussing, as I mentioned, they calculated a Lexile that equated to different oral reading fluency rates. For example, over here you can see highlighted, when a student in third grade read 80 words per minute, their formula equates them to a 410 Lexile, that they can handle text at a difficulty of a Lexile of 410. So let's look at how that translates into the UURC fluency criteria. Well, for third grade placement, our rate is 80 words per minute. So thinking back to that last slide, we had 80 words per minute connected to a Lexile of 410. All right, on our chart, we have used the ranges reported by the Utah Core Standards, as well as metametrics, and we've spliced the band that they report for grade 2 and 3, and it lands at 425 Lexile up to 645 Lexile. So the 425 would be considered the beginning of third grade or earlier third grade. So if we consider that, this 80 words per minute equating to about a 425 Lexile is quite close to what was reported in the linking study. The linking study actually put 82 words a minute to a 425 Lexile. So definitely within a very close range to that linking study. Again, note that there is no change in grades 1 through 2. Passages have remained the same. The cover sheet looks the same. You report the data exactly the same. What has changed are grades 3 and up. Okay, note that there is no E, M, or D listed anymore. There's a single passage or a single column for grade 3. There's a single column for grade 4 and 5 together, and a single column for grades 6, 7, and 8. That is because there's a single passage for grade 3, as well as a single passage for grade 4 and 5, and then a third passage right there for grade 6, 7, and 8. Determine your instructional level based on the highest places where the student meets or exceeds the accuracy and rate criteria. Same for independent levels. Let's take a look at why we aren't using the E, M, and D descriptors anymore. Why are we not differentiating between 3E, 3M, and 3D, etc.? All right, the reasoning behind dropping E, M, and D for grades 3 and up is rooted in how Lexiles are designed. They're designed to span multiple grade levels, not just even multiple times of year within one grade level. Now, Metametrics did look at one point in time to do a study to develop norms and look at norms for what Lexile students were performing at different times of the year in different grades. Now, this is not generally how they look at placing students in Lexiles, but they did this study and it is definitely relevant to what we're talking about here. So what you'll note is that at the beginning of the year, a student performing in the 50th percentile was reading with proficiency a text of difficulty at the 530 Lexile level. At the end of the year, a student performing in the 50th percentile was able to grapple with text at that was measured to be 645 Lexile. Okay, so the difference between the beginning and the end of the 3rd grade year for someone performing in the 50th percentile was only a difference of 115 Lexiles. Okay, you'll note for 4th grade, it remained the same. The difference was 115 Lexiles. But as we go down the grade levels through to 12th grade, they get smaller and smaller differences, to the point that when you're in 12th grade, your beginning of a year Lexile for someone performing in the 50th percentile was 1270. And at the end of the year, it was 1295, a difference of only 25 Lexile. If we look at the differences between grade levels, they also get smaller and smaller as we move up the grades, to the point when there's no difference between the 11th and 12th grade. That is some reasoning behind why Lexile looks at this in terms of bands rather than individual grade levels. Many publishers also do not report Lexiles in any smaller increment than 50 Lexile differences. So a Lexile of 100 and then 150. You don't see many Lexiles reported at 110 or 112, for example. There are some publishers that go smaller, but many even are working at 100 Lexile increments. So that is, again, how you can see the establishment of these bands. Lexile looks at bands of grades. So there's a 2nd and 3rd grade is bound together, 4th and 5th, and then 6, 7, and 8. All right, with that in mind, Lexile has designated bands of grades that hang together. So 2nd and 3rd grade is put together, 4th and 5th is grouped together, and then 6, 7, and 8 is its own group. The Lexile range for 2nd and 3rd grade is anywhere from 450 up to 790. For 4th and 5th, it's 770 to 980, and for 6, 7, and 8, 955 to 1155. So that is how Metametrics has grouped the grades and the bands, and the Utah Core Standards follow suit. They also are looking at grade levels of grouping grade 2 and 3 together, grade 4 and 5 together, and grade 6, 7, and 8. When we're talking about Lexile and text difficulty. You can also see that there's overlap. So our 2nd and 3rd grade level Lexile range actually overlaps the 4th and 5th, as does the 4th and 5th overlaps the 6th through 8th. So there's really an intention to have some fluidity between grade levels and these Lexile ranges. Here at the clinic, for the purposes of intervention and being able to more precisely select text for intervention purposes, we have divided the bands into grade levels, not just 2, 3, but we've separated. Grade 2 is separated from grade 3. We have grade 4 and grade 5 separated, but we actually use the same passage to determine instructional placement in that level, and that is one of the reasons why. But we do not break it down into EM and D because further division becomes irrelevant as we move higher and higher up the grade levels and up the complexity of text. Okay, so within those, instead of breaking it down into EM and D, we are still differentiating between the grade levels based on rate and accuracy.
If you have any questions, please feel free to contact Dr. Kathleen Brown or myself at the Reading Clinic.